So in the lecture section, we have already somewhat finished our discussion with support vector machine. So in today's lab also, we are going to perform the implementation of support vector machine and also with the implementation of kernel function. So in the previous lecture, I have already discussed about kernel function, right? I suppose everyone was a little bit clear that what kernel function was doing and how it was making our implementation, our function calculation, that is the calculation part was made much easier with the help of kernel function, right? Also, I need to upload the PPT. I am aware of it. So I'll be uploading by today itself. By today. So for reference, you may so that you can study for the reference and let me know in the Wednesday's lecture if you are facing any difficulty in understanding any topic in regards to third session as well, right? So we have already studied about support vector machine. In the previous lab also, I had asked you to perform the implementation of MNIST data set with respect to this neural network as well as with support vector machine, I suppose, right? So in today's lab, okay, maybe after some time, if it is not a problem, since because I am aware of it that it is required for the reference, but some of the things I need to make clear in the PPT. That's why it is taking a little bit time. So maybe I'll try to upload by today, right? By the lab session. Okay. Yes. Hello. Okay. So I'll upload a lab file right now, in which there is a basic implementation of support vector machine with the help of using a make blob function that is present in sklearn.dataset, right? Creating random samples using make blob and then trying to implement support vector machine on that particular dataset, right? That is one implementation as a part of implementation. Just a minute, let me upload it so that it will get clear. Okay, everyone, I have assigned you lab 11 SVM support vector machine. In that lab file, you can see there are two files present. One is the normal SVM implementation using linear kernel. So the very first implementation that we have studied is in context with linear implementation of SVM, that the data is linearly separable and you can use a normal linear SVM to create a hyperplane to separate those data sets. And in the second implementation, so in the first one, there is two implementation is given to you. One with the one that is you have to create with the help of make blob function that is present in sklearn.dataset, and you have to try to create for the linearly separate those data set, those random sample that have been created, and there is a code already given for creating the decision surface and all, right? The second one that you have to do on a real-time data set, that is breast cancer data set, that is present in the sklearn.data set. So if using that particular data set, you have to perform your SVM, you have to apply your SVM on that particular data set and create a decision boundary and observe that what is the accuracy that you are getting. Similarly, you have to apply the same on the MNIST data set that I think you might have already done, but right now you have to understand the importance of applying different kernels and studying that what are the results in different by applying the different types of kernels on that particular data set, right? That is what you're supposed to do. Also, in this file, along with this, I have uploaded another file that is with SVM kernels. If you can see, in that particular file, I would like you to open, all of you to keep that file open so that we can discuss at this point of time, and then we can proceed with the lab session. So in the SVM kernel file, that you can see that I have created a data set using make circles. Okay, these are all functions that are present in scikit-learn already. They are inherently present. They are just being used to create that particular data set. So here, if you can see, this data set that I have created is not linearly separable. If you try to create a linear boundary out of on this two-dimensional data set that is present to you, where you have some points inside the circle and some point outside the circle, then you cannot create a linear decision boundary for this particular data set. Even though using a linear decision boundary, we have tried to implement. So here, if you can see, we have divided the data set using train test split. Then we have applied a kernel, a linear kernel on that particular data set, right? एक मिनट. Okay, so here if you can see, I suppose my screen is visible to you all. Yes, okay. So here if you can see, I have applied a SVM kernel, that is I have used SVC in order to create the implementation, in order to create an SVM model, and then I have used a kernel that is linear kernel. Linear kernel means a normal xi.xj that we were doing in the dual formation, the very first dual formation that we had created in the case of hard margin. So if you can recall the Laplace dual form, it was in the form of product of xi.xj, right? The simple linear kernel we'll be using, and we'll try to using fit and transform, we'll try to predict on test data. So if you can see, the accuracy of the test data is 0.55, which is very low. So here using the plot decision boundary function, I have tried to plot this particular decision boundary that the model has created. So half of the negative, half of the blue data points are not even classified correctly. So we cannot create a linear decision boundary in the case of this particular data set. Now, if you try to see this particular data set on a three-dimensional plot, suppose I try to, what we are trying to do is, we are trying to create, so what was the context of the kernel was converting your data to higher dimensional and then trying to create a linear decision boundary. But kernel was inherently doing it. We need not convert into into a higher dimensional and save those features and then learn those features to perform the separation. So I'm just here we are just plotting that particular three-dimensional form. So what we are doing is we are using an RBF kernel. Okay, what we are doing is we are creating a function. We are creating an R. R is a function, phi of x. So we had discussed in yesterday's lecture that in order to convert your data to higher dimension, we need a function phi of x. Phi of x can be any function. It can be x square, x cube, or anything you can use to convert your data into higher dimension. Then using that new dimensional data. For example, your new dimensional data is x, x square, x cube. Okay, this is a new dimensional data, three-dimensional data that you have created from your existing data set. So what you can do using that new dimensional data, now you are trying to create a linear boundary passing through that. So for example, I am using a function r, which is exponential of x square and summation of all exponential e raised to minus x square. Okay, summation of all e raised to minus x square, where x is your given feature. Are you getting the point? Yes or no? or is it okay, 1 minute. So in yesterday's lecture that we had discussed, so we had discussed that in order to convert your data set to some higher dimension, so in yesterday's lecture that we had discussed, we are using, before using a kernel function, what we were doing is we were converting our x to some higher dimension using phi of x. So here that phi of x is r. Okay, r is that phi of x, which is e raised to minus x square summation over e raised to minus x square, where x is your data. X is your data that you are the given data in your particular model that you are creating. Here x is this one. So here we have created x using make circles. So this is your data that is given to you. Using the data, we are creating a third dimension. We are creating a third dimension with using r. R is a function that you are applying to create a multi-dimensional form. So here you can see, after using that three-dimensional function, we are creating a three-dimensional plot of that particular data set x and y. Okay, x and y, we are creating a particular three-dimensional form. So here, this is the form that is created after converting, after using that particular x1, x2, and the third dimension that we have used is r. R is the third dimension that we have created with the existing data set in hand, which is a two-dimensional data set of the form x1, x2. Okay, this is the form of data set, how it will be present in your inside your data set. So it will be form of x is equal to x1, x2 form of two-dimensional data set will be present, but we are adding a third dimension r, which is a function of x, which is summation over e raised to minus x square. Okay, are you getting the point? So this actually the 3D graph that has been created using these three features. So you can see all the blue points are on the lower side of the graph, and all the red points are separated on the upper boundary. So now we can pass a plane through this three-dimensional form, yes or no? Are you getting the point? Yes, but so this is how what will be happening in the case of normally what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a three-dimensional form of higher dimensional data set. Then we'll be storing those features in our data set. So storing of all these three-dimensional features. Right now we are converting to three-dimensional. It is possible we may convert into six-dimensional form of data set, and then we have to store all the six-dimensional in our data set, and then learn those features to apply the SVM to create a decision boundary, which will be very costly, which is computationally very costly. We had seen yesterday also that product of phi of x into phi of xi into phi of xj is computationally very costly process. Right, we have to find phi of xi, then we have to find phi of xj, and then we have to perform the product between these two. So instead of that, what we are doing is we are going to take a kernel function which will find a similarity to this higher dimensional form. Instead of performing the computation using the higher dimensional form, finding the phi of x form, and then performing the computation, we'll directly do the computation with the existing features in hand, such that it will create a decision boundary to passing through this non-linear form of data. Are you getting the point? What SVM is trying to do? So it is actually reducing the computation that you are going to do in the case of higher dimensional data. So after converting to higher dimensional data and then performing the computation, which is very costly, instead of that, we'll be using a suitable kernel function, which will do the summation in the existing lower dimension only, and will create a decision boundary. Will create a nonlinear decision boundary for our data set. Is everyone getting the point? Yes or no? Okay, so that's why here, instead of storing this, so here what we are doing is we are taking another kernel here. Now we are performing the implementation using kernel here. So here, if you can see, we are taking a kernel, RBF kernel, for example. So each kernel may have different function. Will be yes, it is a radial basis function kernel, that is a kernel in hand. So we have different kind of kernel in the case of SVM. Normally we use linear kernel, that is normally xi.xj, that is a normal product. Then we have a polynomial form of kernel. Polynomial form of kernel is 1 plus xi.xj raised to d, where d is your degree, the degree of the polynomial which you want to give, 2, 3, whatever you want to give, you can give. So it is actually a similarity based function, that kernel. So instead of the Laplace, if you represent the Lagrangian function, if you recall, which is summation of alpha I minus 1 upon 1 half summation I j, alpha I, alpha j, yi, yj, and xi, xj. So instead of replacing this, what will be happening is xi.xj will be replaced by kxi.xj, kxi.xj, which is actually a kernel function, which could be linear kernel, which is normal product of xi.xj, which could be polynomial kernel, which is 1 plus xi.xj. So if you can see, this kernel function is actually dealing with lower dimensional data only. It is not converting your data to any higher dimension and then performing a calculation, right? And there can be RBF kernel, which is of the form e raised to minus something like x2 minus x1 the whole square upon sigma square, something like this, also known as Gaussian kernel sometimes. But radial basis function kernel is one form of kernel that we can use. Are you getting the point? Yes, Keval? Yes, that is one problem that we can face at this point of time, is to decide the kernel according to the data set that is given to us. So that is one problem that we can face. But what you can do is you can try to, for this data set also, we have performed the implementation using RBF kernel at this point of time, and we are getting an accuracy equals to 1, approximately 1. But if you, since this data set is exactly linearly separable now using RBF kernel, so we are getting an accuracy of 1. Similarly, I have also used a different kernel, for example, polynomial kernel with degree 3. Okay, polynomial kernel, I have also tried to implement the same. Using a polynomial kernel with degree 3, you can see the accuracy is very low. So that is one problem that we are facing at this point of time, is deciding the appropriate kernel for the data set that is given to you. So most probably what you can do is you can try different kernels and see what the accuracy that you are getting, and based on that you can decide that whichever kernel is better for your data set. Are you getting the point? Okay, so here if you see in the implementation part that is given to you, we have created an RBF kernel and tried to fit on the exact data set that is given to us. We are not creating any third dimensional data and trying to implement on this, but we are creating an RBF kernel and using the same data set that is given to us, that is the only the lower dimensional data that is given to us, and we are getting a very high accuracy score using the RBF kernel. Similarly, now if you will plot the decision boundary, you will get something like this. A decision boundary, a non-linear decision boundary is formed here, and it is actually instead, it is kind of creating a similarity to higher dimensional form. Okay, it is not going to convert your data to higher dimension and then perform the calculation, but it will draw some similarity and will perform the computation in the lower dimension itself, right? Similarly, if you try to do the same using polynomial kernel of degree 3, you can try for degree 2 also and check what is the output that you are getting. So here the accuracy score is very less. So you can say that polynomial kernel is not an appropriate kernel for the data set that is given to us in hand. And if you try to draw the decision boundary, you'll get something like this. Okay. So these are so now I suppose everyone is clear with the idea of kernel, what it is trying to do and how it is trying to reduce your mathematical computation. Yes or no? Is everyone clear with this? Okay. So now what you are supposed to do is now I have uploaded both the files is present in the classroom. So perform the implementation. Try to understand the implementation of the kernels that is given to you, and perform the implementation with the data set. Sorry, just a minute. So try to understand the implementation. Try to perform the implementation with the make blob, that is a random dataset sample that we are creating using make blob, and create the implementation brief implementation for that, and then try to implement the same on a actual dataset in hand, that is breast cancer prediction example, right? And try to perform the same using MNIST, and use different types of linear, polynomial, and RBF kernel, and see what are the difference in the accuracy. Also, try to create your confusion matrix, and create the confusion matrix also that you are supposed to do the entire confusion matrix for how many are correctly classified and wrongly classified, and so on, for the data set in hand, right? So I suppose everyone is clear with today's lab work. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Yeah, that is for studying purpose right now. You have to study the file that is given to you. For reference, I had included it for your reference, so that you can understand what is the main idea behind this kernel and all. And also try to now you have to implement the same on the data sets that is given to you, right? So try to implement the same, right? Okay, fine. So start with the implementation. Meanwhile, I'll try to upload this file, the PDF of this SVM in classroom for your reference, right? And if you have any doubt, please you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can ask in the chat box. Priyank, I think one we have created using this one, this make circles. We have created a non-linearly separable data. Make circles. So if you can see that we have created a non-linearly separable data using make circles. Yes. Okay. Also, I would like to suggest you all to go through the SVC, all the attributes that are present in your SVC function. So one that we studied regarding hard margin and soft margin, if you recall, we had studied about the two different types of margin, hard margin and soft margin. Where in hard margin you are not allowed any misclassification error, while in soft margin you are allowed to have certain misclassification error. That is, some points may be inside the margin and maybe on the other side as well, and that's how we'll be creating a margin that is separating the 2 points the two data that we have in hand, right? So I'll there is one parameter called C that we had discussed yesterday. So if we increase the value of C very much high, then we are trying to minimize the misclassification as much as possible, and if we reduce the value of C, then we are trying to maximize the margin as much as possible. So also try to make changes with the parameter C that is present in your SVC function, and see what are the changes that you are getting, right? Is it clear? Okay. Also, since Priyank asked one question that how to create non-linearly separable data, so using make blobs also you can create more closer data sets. Like normally how we are creating a data set using make blob is we are using a sample and you have cluster standard deviation and certain parameters are present, right? So using that also you can create more closer data, and then you can try to create an implementation for soft margin as well by changing the values of C and check that what is the decision boundary that you are getting. So that is a parameter called cluster standard deviation in the make blob function, right? Try to change the values and check that more closer data set, that is more non-linearly separable data set can be created through that also. So try to check that one as well, right? Okay. Okay, train classifier in PDF. Just a minute. Okay, train classifier. By that I mean that you have to use a fit function and the fit function on the data set that is present to you. That is what you are asking, right? After the declaring the classifier svm.svc, right? Yes, that I mean by using the fit function there, right? Yes, maybe try with two centers at this point of time, or maybe three or yes, at this point of time take two centers. But no, since we are using, if you are using three centers, what will happen is you are going to create three different set of data sets, I guess, three different classes. That is what it means. So at this point of time, just use two as, because we are right now we'll be creating for two dimensional. So we'll stick with two. With right now we are dealing with two class, that is one and second. Multi-class classification is still there, but we are with this implementation try to form for two, right, for two different classes.
Yes.
Yeah. Priyank, we only apply kernel on two features only. So yes, right now in the data in the one that I have given to you, in that we have applied for only two features. That X is in the form of two-dimensional features. It is a two-dimensional feature form, which is X1, X2. Okay, it is two-dimensional form. You can also try for multiple dimension and get results as well, right? Okay. Yes, Priyank, for the multidimensional data, try for Seaborn, that Seaborn library that is present with you. I already tried with Matplotlib to perform the multi for the multidimensional data that is present. Right now we have for two dimensional, we can easily draw the decision boundary and showcase. But for multidimensional, it might not be very easy to solve this particular decision boundary using Matplotlib. But you may try for a Seaborn a library that is present with you, I think, right? That library you may try and check that whether that can be helpful. But with Matplotlib, I'm not able to find any solution as of now. But if any of you can is able to find any solution, then you are welcome to discuss right now as well. Has anybody tried to plot the decision boundary with the help of multidimensional data? Okay, I suppose, but this is one thing that everyone please try and let me know whether any one of you is able to find any ways to find plot that data, right? Okay, but try for the Seaborn library, fine. context of multi-class SVM, I just wanted to give a brief idea, which in theoretical point of view. So in the case of multi-class SVM, right now, in all that we discussed was with the case of binary classification. In the case of SVM, where we had only two classes in which we were trying to divide our data set, but we may have multiple classes. That is, if you take Iris data set, then we have three classes in which we will be trying to divide our data set, right? So in that cases, in theoretical point of view, we have two approaches: one versus one and one versus all. Where in one versus one, what we'll be doing, suppose we have three different classes in which we'll be trying to divide our data set, then we'll be creating three different support vector machine classifier, wherein we'll be having something like this. Just a minute, let me share the screen to give you an idea that what. So if you see this diagram that I have drawn over here, this is the case with 1 versus 1. So wherein we are creating, suppose we have A, B and C, three different data we have in hand. So we'll be drawing we'll be creating three different support vector machine classifiers, which in one will be A versus B, wherein we have this decision boundary, this green decision boundary right now. Just a minute. This decision boundary is A versus B. Okay, I think just a minute. No, sorry, it is A versus C. Then we have another decision boundary, which we have A, B versus C, B or C. And then we have third decision boundary, which is for A versus B. Okay, this decision boundary is for A versus B. This second one is for B versus C, and the third one is for A versus C. Okay, now whenever a new data set is coming into picture, for example, this is the data set that is new data set that is coming into picture. What we'll try to see whether it is in A or C, which decision boundary it is in A. Now again we'll check for B versus C, it is in B. Again it will check for A versus C, which is A versus B, which is again A. So two of the SVM out of the three SVM that we have created classifies into class A, which is majority. Based on majority based voting, it will classify the data, the new data set in the class A. Okay, so in whenever you try to draw a decision boundary, something like this will be created. In the case of decision boundaries that you'll create, something like this will be created. Whenever you try to plot using matplotlib, this kind of decision boundary will be created. Are you getting the idea what will be happening in the case of 1 versus 1? Yes or no? In the case of multi-class classification? Yes, see, when we'll be having 30 features, plotting this will be much more difficult. Yes, I agree with that, but the context is same. That in theoretical concept, the context is same. That what we'll be doing is, we'll be having three different, in the case of 30 dimensional, just imagine that in the 30 dimensional area or 30 dimensional way the data is presented. So you will be having three different classes, right? So the data will be linearly separable. Right now we are considering it is linearly separable. So it will be having three different cluster of data present with us, and we'll be trying to create a decision boundary versus 1 versus 1. So suppose we have 30 different features, but three different classes. Okay, three different classes. For in case of Iris dataset, we have 4 features and we have 3 different classes in which we are trying to divide our data set. I think, yes. So that is what we are trying to do. So ultimately you will be drawing these decision boundaries 1 versus 1. So we'll be having one class, A class versus B class versus C class versus A class. So in case of A versus C, we'll be having A as suppose considered as positive class. It will be assigned as +1 and C will be assigned as -1. In case of A versus B, A will be assigned +1 and B will be assigned -1, and B versus C, B will be assigned +1 and C will be assigned -1. Whichever you can, this inherently will be doing a process in the case of sklearn. Are you getting the idea what it is doing? Yes or no? Okay. Is everyone getting the idea what I'm trying to say at like present at this point of time? Okay. Similarly, for the another context that we have is in the case of 1 versus all. One versus all, wherein we have cases like A or not A, B or not B, and C or not C. Okay, let us consider, like, suppose this is a data set A, this is the data set C, and this is the data set B. Okay, so if this decision boundary that we are doing, this decision boundary that we have created is A versus not A. Similarly, this decision boundary that we have created is B versus not B, and this decision boundary that we have created is for C versus not C. Okay, so everything on this side is C and the rest is on not C. Suppose we have a new data point. This is the new data point that we have in hand. So this will go for all. So A or not A. Let us say for A or no, right now let us say for A or not A, it will classify in A. Now suppose we are going for B and not B, then it will classify in not B. Similarly, we are going for C and not C, then again it is classifying in not C. Yes. So through this way, we can identify that the new test point that we have in hand, it is being classified into class A. So this is another theoretical approach for this approach that we have in the case of multi-class SVM. We'll be creating multiple models through approach of one versus one or one versus all. Are you getting the point? Yes or no? Yes, please let me know in the chat section whether you are facing any difficulty. Okay, one versus all. See, one versus all, what will happen in case of one versus all is, for example, we'll be creating three classifier wherein we'll be having one as A or not A. So all the not A will be assigned -1 class, all the A's will be assigned +1 class. Similarly, for B, we'll be assigning B or not B. So all the B's will be assigned +1, rest will be assigned -1. Similarly, C or not C. Okay, C will be assigned +1, rest will be assigned -1. Suppose we have this new data point over here. So now we'll be trying to classify based on the hyperplanes that we have created over here, based on all the hyperplanes that we have created, 3 hyperplanes we have created. So we'll assign that whether this point is in A or not A. So first classifier that we have is A or not A, right? So it will classify this particular data point in A. Next we have this hyperplane. Let us consider this hyperplane right now. So for this we have B and not B. So if you can see, this is a not B section. So we'll be assigning this in class not B. Similarly, the third one is C or not C. Okay, so again this point is in not C section. So again it will be not C. So if you can see, the majority class that you are getting assigned in class A, that's why it will identify that it belongs to class A, the data point, right? Are you getting the point now? Yes or no? So here point, see which hyperplane that we have created, there is no this right now in theoretical section I have shown this way, but whenever you are creating a decision boundary, something like this will be created. The average of this will be taken and something like this decision boundary will be created. So there won't be any point in there won't be any triangle in case, right? So something like this will be created in actual implementation if you go, right? So there won't be any point there. Are you getting the point now? Everyone is clear with this? Okay. Yes, so proceed with the implementation. So how far has everyone reached in the case of implementation? Would anyone like to share their screen and share their work? Where they have reached in the case of SVM? Yes, Priya. Okay, Priyank, you are not audible.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So I have completed that make circle parts.
Okay.
Then using linear and RBF2 kernel function.
Okay. Just go a little down. Okay, you have created using linear and then
Yeah,
using
and I
RBF.
am getting accuracy 0.45,
Okay. Yes.
and then I have done using RBF, and I
Okay.
am getting accuracy 1.
Okay. So did you try for breast cancer data set? Did you start
Yes,
with that?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
But I am not able to plot that boundary. But I am
Okay.
getting accuracy 0.92 in the case of using RBF, and
Yes.
0.96 using linear.
Okay. So maybe linear is quite better in the case of
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one,
Because
right?
data is not much non-linear type.
Okay.
That's why I think.
Okay, fine. So try for different another kernel as well, polynomial kernel, and also see what is the implementation. And again, for MNIST dataset also try the same, right?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
good.
But I think, ma'am, it
Yes.
is whole data set is passed into the training here.
Okay.
If I want to pass only two features, then how to do that?
Okay, you want to pass only
Two
okay
features.
out of
Like
how
I
many
have
features there?
in the breast cancer data set, 30 features are there.
Okay.
So like if I want to do that first column and that 11th column, that
Oh.
data set looks like
Hmm.
this kind of chart, and
Yes.
now I want to apply SVM function, then how to do that?
Okay, only the two features you want to take,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
maybe
yes
one
ma'am, yes
and two.
ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah,
what you can do is maybe so here we are taking directly from scikit-learn. You have loaded from scikit-learn.
yes ma'am.
Okay, maybe what you can do is after storing that in a particular array, you can yes apply PCA, but no. Here what we are trying to do is only want to take only first and second features, right? You do not
Yeah,
want to reduce the dimension or anything. So what you can do, you can apply, you can take slicing and just take one and first and second column as your features and then try SVM, right? You may try
okay,
array slicing, and through that maybe you will be able to take only two of the feature column as in your input and then apply SVM for the same. Keep your
okay,
y output as it is, right?
okay
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
So Prince, I think since here he is trying to just take only two features in, so we are not going to apply PCA over here, right? Okay. Okay, fine. So I suppose that is clear.
Yes ma'am.
Okay. Yes, fine. No issues. Anybody else?
Thank you ma'am.
Yes, Dhruv, do you have any doubt? You have raised your hand. All right, so I'll end the meeting now. I suppose everyone is clear with today's lab assignment and what they're supposed to do in the lab work. So as again, I'll mention that you have to keep your lab assignment keep your repositories updated, your GitHub repositories, and upload all the lab work that you have done till now in the GitHub repository. Your offline evaluation is being done, so make sure that you do that regularly. Okay, so by the end of next week you all your lab work should be done. And yes, and in I'll try to upload I'll upload uh, the reference for the reference material for SVM today itself. So study that and let me know in the lecture on Wednesday if you are facing any difficulty, and we'll also discuss some of the topics, remaining topics in the case of SVM and in other points as well, right? So study those topics as well, and I'll upload it today so that you can refer it and understand well. Fine. So I'm ending the meeting now. Fine. Keep your repositories updated. Fine.